Claire sighed again and ran her hand through her hair. In slow tugging movements, she undid her ponytail and letting her loose hair sway in the wind. She was tired for a good cause. Most of the civilians had recovered from the attack. The government had provided temporary housing for many, and others had improved significantly. That she had heard about the reconstruction of the city had already begun. It would be some time before things returned to normal. But there was hope for many. She was pleased with herself for having been a part of the people who changed the world for the others. But God knew how tiring it was. Sherry had asked her to train earlier, but she had refused, which it was rare. Perhaps the mental fatigue was greater, and practically everyone said she felt like she deserved a rest. Her eyes lifted to the sky. It wasn't a full moon night, but she liked looking at the stars. Her shift technically wasn't over yet, so that was pretty much all she had to do while waited for her break. After a few minutes, she heard footsteps approaching. At first, she was curious. A few soldiers entered that part of the camp at night, but soon she recognized who it was. The footsteps were too light for one to be one of the soldiers, and it was distinctive smelt of mint gum. Ghost was approaching, and in the distance he stopped for a moment, probably surprised to see her there. But when he approached at the same pace as before, making Claire look at him when he got close enough. "Ghost, good to see you," she said, maintaining eye contact with him for a few moments before turning back to face the sky. "Redfield," he greeted her back, and at the same time, reserved manner. "So did Pierce give you a hard time today?" she asked amusedly, and the agent sighed slightly. "I respect his curiosity. I could tell that he wants to improve himself." Claire smiled sideways. "Really? You don't feel frustrated that you tried to stay away from them for so long, only for one of them to follow you around all day and draw attention to you?" she asked again, still amused, but he was silent for a few moments. "It was inevitable. I have attracted a lot of attention since I've arrived," he replied. I agree with that," she said, shaking her head slightly sideways and sighing again. She liked the massage. "Busy day?" he asked, and she ducked her head slightly. Despite the occasional conversation she had with him, she still wasn't entirely used to all that friendliness. Well, not that she would complain little by little. She found herself drawn to him. She didn't exactly know why, but that mysterious yet familiar tone intrigued her. Not to mention that she was easy to talk to and had a surprisingly good sense of humor. "Well, sometimes. You know how hard it is, how checking on some patients, releasing others, tests on some. Sometimes it feels like a marathon," she said, sitting down on the floor and resting her arms on her thighs. It's admirable. You do feel like it's worth it," she said. In response, she just shook his head, and her face wearing a shy smile. "And what about you? What are you doing in the tent?" She glanced at him, and he crossed his arms, leaning against a nearby tree. "Out discussing some details with Hunk and paperwork," he said. That Claire arched an eyebrow, questioning. "What? I have a report to do." She laughed lightly. "What bravery! It's a bit easier," she said. He stared at her. "Yes, it is, when you're not attacked by a ferocious paper cut," he joked, and she laughed a little louder. "I've had worse. Flu shot," he whistled. "To the horror," he joked. It was strangely amusing to hear him joke in a professional voice, and now she was used to it. "At least you're not dealing with people," Claire said. "It's worse than paperwork. The arrogant, all stupid liars." Ghost just shook his head. "On that I agree, especially the liars. Never trust the atom," he said, and she looked at him with an arched eyebrow. "They make everything up." She groaned, but she still couldn't control her laughter. "Boy, it's still hard to believe you and your jokes. You have a whole book of them?" Ghost shrugged. "Guilty as charged," Hunk calls it. Ghost's crap book of questionable jokes. He stared at her. For some reason, she wanted to laugh at the serious ways his eyes stared at her. It's limited edition. "Oh my God," she said between short bursts of laughter. They sat in silence for a few moments, enjoying the surprisingly friendly atmosphere. She still wasn't so sure what to make of the situation. But he was very different from what she'd intently imagined. Deep down, she was afraid to approach him, and a part of her mind warned her to stay away. He was a totally unknown agent whose main purpose in life was to kill. But she didn't stop. Even she couldn't say why. Ghost, for his part, was in his same situation. Part of him being warned to stay away, and another part, the really dangerous part, felt his heart skip a beat when he had saw her with her hair loose. She felt charmed by the woman's unique beauty, mesmerized by her eyes. This could be as serious consequences. He and she could die because of it. So, Ducati or Harley, huh? His voice pulled down from the woman from her thoughts, who blinked in surprise and confusion, and surprised in her direction. Sherry told me you were planning to buy a motorcycle. Ah, yes, I used to have one, a long time ago, and I have been wanting one for a while now. I just miss the feel of it, she said, tucking a lock of her hair behind her ear, curious to hear the agent hold his breath, the attentive when his heart started beating a little faster. She just ignored it, not wanting to jump into conclusions. The idea of being the few, or the only person that could react to the man like that was both incredibly arousing and incredibly frightening. So, which one did you choose? He asked again. Not yet, but I think I'll have to go with the Harley. I like the design, and it's the one I had before, she said, and he grunted softly, looking thoughtful. The Harley is really good, but I'll go with the Ducati. The woman looked at him with both eyebrows arched, a slight smile on her face, an expression of curiosity and surprise. They had more in common than she thought, and for some reason, it was good timing. Look at that. I didn't think you liked motorcycles, she said, and she shrugged. What can I say? It was the vehicle I enjoyed most to learning to handle. She shook her head. There's no feeling like it, but why the Ducati? He burrowed his head slightly. Why not the Ducati? It's a performance machine. Beauty, precision, and speed. Everything a man needs. She grimaced slightly, shrugging. I don't know about that, but it's certainly fast. But there's nothing like the rumble of Harley. You feel the power, not to mention the iconic design, she said, keeping her friendly tone. Power? It has to be a Redfield. Just power, no agility, he joked, and Clara gave him a falsely offended look, and he just shrugged. Good luck racing around that town on that bulky Harley. It's a refrigerator on wheels, he joked back, and Claire just stood up, crossing her arms while maintaining her offended but playful gaze. I don't have to rush through traffic like a madman. With the Harley, it's just about enjoying the ride. Ugh, that's the problem with men. They only care about the climax and not the part that comes before. She then began to shake her head. With certain drama, she couldn't hold back her laughter, and she saw him staring at her with certain intensity. Rude, he said, seriously professional, which made her laugh a little louder. I still prefer the Ducati. The question of technology. The Ducati is more advanced. It's like comparing a super advanced robot with an ordinary man, he said, noticing the change in the woman's acquaintance. Her smile died a little and her eyes became a little dark, but she soon disguised it. It's the same argument I use with Sherry when she says Rambo is better than Terminator, she said, and he only stared at her for a few moments, remembering the wild little argument he had with her on that train. She's not wrong, he said. Claire made an incredulous expression, looking at him as if he was crazy. Oh no, not you too, she said dramatically. What? It's a great movie, he said. What is it with you people in bad tastes? Are you going to say Rambo's bad? No, but Terminator's much better. What's Rambo gonna go against killing a machine? Destroy? Are you serious? She asked. He's also a killing machine. But he's human. I doubt a human could go up against the Terminator. I'm pretty sure I could, he said. And she paused for a few moments, thinking about his words. Then she looked at him with inelastic eyes. I'd admit that you might not be able to, but you all have this technology at your disposal. Rambo didn't. He lived in the 80s, and the technology doesn't even compare. But if he had access to it, could he do it? The point is that he doesn't. They were silent for a few moments. so involved to be a friendly conversation that they didn't even hear their inner voices alerting them into what they were doing. To be honest with themselves, they didn't mind too much. It was good that they just wanted to enjoy it a little. Rambo's still better. Claire stared at him. Well, I suppose there's nothing I could do about you being wrong. Chris ran backwards and jumped to the side a few moments before the tyrant landed to the ground, its huge arm embedded by the concrete where the soldier had been moments before. Chris raised his rifle but soon grunted when he felt his vest being hit by several bullets from Irving's gun, who was walking calmly towards him while unloading his clip. Redfield jumped backwards and he threw a stun grenade on the ground, gritting his teeth and ignoring the pain as he felt that he was hit a few times. Luckily, still in his tactical vest, the stun grenade exploded, temporarily stunning both the tyrant and Irving. Chris quickly got up and threw a hand grenade towards the two of them, and he ran towards the elevator, quickly pressing the button to go up. There was no way he could fight the two of them off in that place. There was only the one corridor that led directly to the elevator, with no doors or rooms that could serve as cover or be open enough for that fight. As much as he didn't like the idea, he had to leave Ghost alone down there. The elevators closed behind as he began to climb. Quickly, Chris bandaged his upper thigh, which had been hit one of Irving's bullets, from his tactical vests as he took some bandages, already bathed in the herbal serum made by Ghost's organization. As he finished bandaging his wound, he grunted as he felt his body suddenly thrown sideways. The entire elevator shook, and he focused his eyes on the claw, running towards the floor just a few centimeters from where the still closed doors. He pointed his rifle downwards and fired, only to feel himself being thrown again and grunt as he kept his balance. The elevator doors opened slightly, only to be prevented from opening completely. The Redfield realized that he was only a few centimeters away from that frickin' director's office. The elevator shook as it tried to continue its journey, only to be stopped by a sheer force of the tyrant. Chris fought quickly and focused his eyes on the small skylight above. Quickly he burst through the bars and leapt upwards, pulling his body onto the roof of the elevator before placing the rifle on his back. He staggered slightly as the elevator shook again, and then jumped into the office ahead, just before the floor of the elevator was completely destroyed by the creature, which was already focusing its clear eyes on the soldier. To his surprise, it wasn't the tyrant that attacked him, but Irving. The man leapt into the elevator with its superhuman agility, and taking a hold of the elevator wall, advancing quickly towards Chris, who gritted his teeth and put his rifle in front of him for protection. He immediately grunted as he felt his body being thrown backwards with extreme force, and he gritted his teeth as he felt his back hit towards the floor. The tyrant jumped up and advanced towards him. Chris, grunting once more, rolled onto his side, grunting lowly as he saw his rifle lying on the floor next to the tyrant. His eyes were focused on Irving, already raising his pistol in his direction. Chris clicked his tongue briefly and, in response, picked up his own rifle and fired at Irving at great speed, so as fast as the man couldn't even react until his pistol was knocked out of his hands, and a few bullets hit him in the chest, knocking him to the ground. The tyrant, as a way of protecting its master, picked up the office table and threw it towards Chris, advancing towards the man shortly afterwards, using the table as a way of camouflaging its movement. Chris dodged as he ducked, as his eyes widened at the sight of the tyrant close to him. He dodged in pure reflex. The huge claw was trying to impale him. Despite managing to dodge, he had no time to feel relieved, as the tyrant simply grabbed him by the neck and threw him against the wall. Chris grunted and grabbed the tyrant's arm with his other hand, and he grabbed his pistol and shot the creature in the head. The tyrant in turn grunted low and threw Redfield against the door, so hard that the wood broke against his body, and he flew a few meters down the corridor. Chris grunted loudly and rolled backwards, ignoring the pain. He understood the creation of that tyrant. Unlike the others who caused so much destruction, this tyrant was focused on the single mission of assassination and experimentation. Its small form, its transformation, allowed it to do things that other tyrants could not even do, like for example being agile and slender. Unlike the slow, heavy, tall register tyrants, basically they had created a private assassin with the superhuman characteristics. "Chris, we heard gunshots! What's going on? He heard Jill ask over the radio. His eyes focused on Irving, walking slightly in a staggered place further behind the tyrant, shaking his head as if those shots had just stunned him. The situation isn't very good. The children? He asked back, altering his gaze between his rifle on the ground and Irving near the gun, and the tyrant approaching with a certain caution. That thing had a certain level of intelligence, that was for sure. Some didn't want to go with us. They're reluctant. We're still here. Do you need any help? Jill replied, and Chris grunted softly. No, concentrate on them. I'll deal with it, Chris replied, taking a stun grenade from his tactical vest and throwing it forward. Irving had no way of doing anything, apart from being too far away to see what it is. He was rather clumsy. However, the tyrant reacted slightly with wide eyes. Just before the grenade exploded, the creature leapt towards Chris, quick and precise, aiming for a single fatal strike. Chris gritted his teeth and dodged to the side while dropping the heavy grenade on the ground. The stun grenade exploded as he ran towards Irving. The tyrant turned to pursue him. However, the heavy grenade exploded with the heavy impact, sent the tyrant staggering backwards to the side a few steps. Chris, at the time, needed to approach the disoriented Irving and drive his machete into his chest, followed by a slashing blow to the stomach and a kick that knocked him to the ground. Chris ran to the office and grabbed his rifle. Without turning around, he ran to the window and jumped through the glass, using his arms as protection. Redfield grunted slightly as he landed on the ground, mentally grunting as he felt the pressure on his knees for a few moments. Soon he stood up and turned with his rifle raised and retreated along the strides, waiting for the tyrant to follow. Redfield, we're on our way, Hunk said through the communicator. Chris focused his gaze on the tyrant above. The creature leapt towards him. However, this is the sound of the gunshot that was heard, similar to that of an explosion, and the tyrant's chest was pierced violently by one of the heavy weapons and reserve the team had brought. The tyrant was hit that was still in the air. Its torso was violently thrown backwards, and it fell into the ground with a heavy thud, rolling a few times on the ground. Oh damn, I should have known that. Irving was suddenly interrupted by another shot, hitting him precisely in the head, causing much of his skull to explode in gray mass and blood. Target's one hit, one of Hunk's men said, and Chris focused his eyes on the fallen tyrant, who remained motionless after being hit. However, to his surprise, not only of him, but everyone who had knew about the view of the situation, huge tentacles emerged from Irving's body and advanced rapidly towards the tyrant. Those tentacles were moving fast, so fast that it was difficult to react. Chris fired his rifle at the tentacles, causing one of them to retreat, giving him the opportunity to shoot at those that were lifting the tyrant's body and carrying it towards Irving, who now had a wounded part of his head regenerating. Chris fired at his tentacles in an attempt to stop them taking the tyrant's body, but the others advanced towards him at great speed. If they were trying to pierce his body, the soldier threw himself to one side and fired at the other tentacles, grunting low, and he ran out of ammunition, and quickly changing the clips on his rifle. His eyes widened slightly as he felt one of his tentacles advance towards his face. He quickly grabbed the machete from his sheath and put his shoulder and stepped to the side, landing a slashing attack on the tentacles as he did so. Irving's body expanded, the skin of his torso tearing along with his other clothes, revealing razor-sharp teeth from a huge mouth that consisted of most of his upper body. The mouth devoured the tyrant's body, and what was once Irving began to swell and grow exponentially, resembling that of a large ball of flesh as the tentacles around it struggled in a frenzy. What the fuck? Hunk, we got a situation here, Chris said through the communicator, firing at the creature forming in front of him, but grunting as he realized the thing didn't simply want to field the shots. Jill, get out of there! The floor beneath the creature's feet cracked, and the frantically flapping of the tentacles caused the wood to give away, and the creature to fall below as its tentacles passed through the concrete with some ease. Ready your B weapons. Pincer position, Redfield. Head towards 7 o'clock to gear up, Hunk said over the comm. But Chris didn't respond immediately. He just started backing up a few steps in the direction that Hunk had. Jill, do you copy? He tried again. In response, he heard some shots coming from the orphanage. His heart pounded in his chest as he gripped the handle of his rifle tightly. What the hell? Chris, the kids! He heard Jill shouting through the communicator, and his eyes widened as some of the tentacles rose in the air, and in the tip of its thin but long claws, somewhere impaled the orphans that were just being pulled towards the pile of flesh that was turning up ahead. Being consumed, though, was the thing's growth. Redfield, get over here now! Beta team, get out of there as soon as possible, Hunk said on the communicator, and Chris gritted his teeth hard, cursing everything and everyone involved in that organization. They may burn in hell. That was his thought when he ran towards Hunk. The light suddenly went out and Ghost clicked his tongue, hearing the sound of a woman's hurried footsteps around him. Very low noises, easy to miss. One mistake and could end up with a bullet in his head or a blade in his neck. When he heard her approaching the spot where he was sneaking over, he took a flash grenade from his tactical vest and threw it in the direction Ida was standing. He heard her grunt and hurried a few steps, but she didn't get very far before the grenade exploded. Ghost stood up from where he was and fired in the woman's direction, using the fire from the shots to locate himself in the room. The woman ran to her side and took cover by one of the large computers there. Ghost just stopped firing. The silence mixed with darkness, and the agent slowly began to walk to his side. His steps were quiet and calm. Despite this, he knew Ida would probably be watching him, but she wouldn't turn off the lights if she couldn't see where her target was. From his tactical vest, he took a part of his glasses, simple glasses similar to an ordinary prescription glasses. However, the high-tech lenses soon scanned the room around him, and the lenses activated just his night vision, just in time to see a woman swinging into her room with a hook shot, speeding towards him with a knife in her hand. Ghost dodged it by jumping to the side and shooed where the woman who was next in the air. Ida, for her part, dropped to the ground and rolled a few times, dodging the bullets. When she realized that he was watching her, she threw a stun grenade in his direction. Ghost ran to his side, turning his face to covering his ears. The grenade exploded, but to his surprise it was a stun grenade. Where no grenades exploded, gas began to emanate and spread rapidly around the room. A greenish cloud enveloped around the room in within moments. The agent grunted and put his arm in front of his nose. At first, there was just a tingling sensation in his face and an itch in his throat. Soon he started coughing. His nose went numb and bittersweet taste spread in his mouth. Poison. Ida stood up from where she was, now wearing a mask similar to Hunk's, and fired at the agent with her submachine gun. Some of the shots hit the man in the tactical vest, causing the agent to fall and roll across the floor. What's wrong? Feeling a bit weak? She asked in a voice laced with ignorance, firing at the direction again. The agent rolled across the floor and jumped into the metal railing, landing in a low area in the test room. But he put his back against the cold surface, raised his mask slightly above his mouth, and spat out a small amount of blood. He lowered his mask again and gritted his teeth, looking up shortly afterwards and focusing his eyes on the woman, who was looking down at him with stern predatory glare, with the gun pointing in his direction. The agent quickly threw his knife at the woman, who widened her eyes and he dodged, and he threw her torso backwards. With that, Ghost quickly got up and jumped over the railing again, landing a kick on the woman's chest, causing the two to stagger back a few steps. He raised her submachine gun again, but he advanced towards her and grabbed her forearm, forcing her to drop the weapon and hit her in the face with a headbutt. The woman grunted in pain, feeling the blood dripping now from her dislocated nose, and a part of her mask was broken. Annoyed, she jumped up and entwined with his head and legs, throwing her body backwards immediately afterwards. Ghost grunted as he felt his body being thrown in the air, but he soon landed with his legs on the ground instead of his back, preventing the woman from finishing her blow. Ida, frustrated, quickly slid her body to the side, tracked her head in with those thighs and grabbed his arm, pulling in an attempt to break it. Ghost put his body in more of a peculiar position, quickly rolled her shoulder back, pulling his arm and trying to land a punch to Ida's face, who widened her eyes and dodged to the side, causing the agent's fist to hit the ground. Sliding her lower body onto the ground, the woman landed a kick to the man's stomach, knocking him backwards and causing her to move away, giving her the opportunity to pick up her pistol and aimed at him. However, he fought the same with being faster than her and fired in her direction. The woman reflectively shielded her face with her arms and threw herself to one side, grunting loudly in pain as she felt her arms and her tactical vest being hit by bullets. "You didn't think your little poison would be enough to kill me, did you?" he said, reloading his pistol and advanced towards at a brisk pace. "I'm disappointed." As he approached, Ida turned and threw a knife at the agent, who dodged it by throwing his torso to the side. This action allowed the woman to pick up the pistol and fired in his direction. Ghost grunts as he felt the size of his torso hit, and he falls to the ground. The woman got up and walked away, throwing another gas grenade at the agent. He coughed and grunted, but ignored it. The adrenaline then began to course through his body, the remains of the virus acting in that position, nullifying its effect, making him ignore the pain, increasing the attributes. He had ran where his knife had fallen. Ida runs to where her submachine gun has fallen, but as she turns, she is hit with a strong punch to the face, and a brief cry of pain escapes from her throat as she is stabbed in the stomach. They both stared at each other for brief moments. Ghost is holding the blade against the woman's stomach, and Ida in turn is holding his forearm. "You should know." They both stared at each other for brief moments. Ghost still holding the blade. "You should know, no amount of money in this world is your life. You should have stayed hidden," Ghost said, shaking his head slightly as he stared in the woman's eyes, and although the mask she wore. Ida lowered her head and laughed with a certain obituary, squeezing the man's forearm. "I'm not the only one who has a job unfinished. It's gotten personal," she said, and Ghost blinked a few times. Something was wrong. "Besides, how long would it be until you came after me? I know that you, like me, don't have a job but leave a job unfinished." The woman quickly kicked the agent in the stomach, knocking him away, and used his momentum to to move away, taking as much distance as possible and ignoring the pain in her stomach. Ghost quickly recovered and set off in her direction. However, to his surprise, the woman threw an incendiary grenade in his direction. The grenade hit his tactical vest, and the fire spread quickly. Ghost struggled violently, pulling off his vest as quickly as possible and throwing it away moments after before the ammunition was engulfed by the flames and her bullets began to fly firing everywhere. The agent grunted as he felt the flames spread to his mask, and he was forced to remove it. Just as he did so, he was hit by a kick to the face, sending him to the ground. All he could do was to keep falling from his kneel down and was to put one hand on the ground, ready to be act again. "I'll be honest, I'm surprised, Leon." Her name was spoken by that woman's voice that sent shivers down his spine. Even though the agent gritted his teeth briefly, turning his body slowly towards the woman, the lights in the room were back on. She knew who he was, not that he had removed his mask at the moment. No, she had known him way before that, for some time. "Who would have thought that cute little cop becoming this?" she said. Despite the mask, she knew before smiling. Ghost slowly stood up and staring coldly at the woman. "What happened to your pretty little face? You look wonderful, I must say, but you were so cute before." "It was adorable," she said, and Ghost snorted in the same derision. "It seems like you've known this for a while," he said, starting to circle slowly towards the woman, who remained motionless, more concerned with the covering the wound on her stomach than with him. "Come on, officer, you're not that stupid. Albert breaks into your little organization and takes your equipment. Did you really think he hadn't collected information on you? Or that friend of yours, Hunk? Or should I say Simon?" He had imagined. A growl escaped his throat. That was bad. He knew that she was so calm, but she couldn't kill him, and she knew it for herself. However, now that he had appeared on the news, and now he was drawing the attention of dangerous people, if she revealed to them who he was, everyone would come into contact with and would be hunted down. In other words, he couldn't let her live, and the problem was that Albert might still have the possession of that information, and so if he decided to reveal it, there was nothing he could do. Not only that, but who knows, Ida could have been sent to. If it was her possession, then she could have said it whoever she wanted. I know what you're thinking, she said, raising her head after bandaging her wound. Slowly she raised her arms and removed the gas mask. The woman wore an amused smile, a little arrogant, but at the same time seductive and dangerous. Her red lips, from both her lipstick and blood, were a beautiful contrast to her fair skin. In one swift movement, she put her nose back in place, wiping the blood from her face with a certain casualness. You're thinking of killing me as soon as possible. Somehow delete this file, which, by the way, I have a few dozen copies of different devices, she teased, starting to slowly circle the agent with a proactive manner. Ghost then just followed her, and his gaze darkening with every word she says, not falling for the temptations of a beautiful assassin in front of him. But maybe you shouldn't talk about me, if by any chance, if these files of some people who hired me. What would happen to sweet Mathilda? Ghost then stopped walking suddenly, his eyes slightly wide, with his face contorted and with an angry expression. His muscles tense and he gritted his teeth. The woman's smile whitened. She wanted to provoke him, and she knew she was succeeding. Perhaps to make a mistake or simply pleasure of seeing him restless. He didn't know. But he do know that he was treading in dangerous territory. Very dangerous territory. Or, I don't know, your parents, poor things, they still think their little boy is dead, evaporated along with Raccoon City. Ida crossed her arms, without abandoning her arrogant expression. With every word she said, Ghost's inside squirmed with his anger grew. That was worryingly. He didn't even know what he would do if he lost control. But at the moment he didn't care. He couldn't let his parents get involved with this. They had nothing to do with it. You know I know about the deal you made with Albert's brother, to leave those two girls alive, she said, turning slightly, grabbing something from her tactical vest, making Ghost's guard go up. He should attack her, but he didn't know what else she knew, especially about Claire and Sherry. I've tried to convince Albert to take them. He liked the idea, but he had some problems that need to be dealt with. Ghost spat out in disdain. Good for him. It is allowed for them to live longer, he said. Ida looked at him with an arched eyebrow. Cocky, aren't ya? Ghost spat again. People shouldn't doubt what I'm capable of. Ida shook her head and shrugged by the slight of it. I don't doubt that, and I also don't doubt there are people who will do anything to catch you, she said, and quickly threw the light grenade in his direction. Ghost gritted his teeth and put a forearm in front of his face, closing his eyes just before the light grenade exploded. Ghost grunted in frustration as he saw Ida disappeared, moving away from him, while considering maybe he should get relieved that she didn't try to kill him. Nonsense, he knew if she knew, and would die if she tried. Agent, do you copy? He heard her voice above, and his eyes focused on the woman now looking down at him through an opening in the ceiling. Probably in the next ventilation ducts. In her hand, a radio. Perfectly, a voice said over the radio. The dark eyes looked amused, even excited at the cold, angry blue ones. Send the file. The agent's eyes widened, and the woman's smile broadened. She was having fun with it, and Ghost would be having fun watching the life drain out of those arrogant eyes. Done, ma'am, the voice replied, and Ghost growled loudly, raising his pistol and firing at the woman. One of the shots hit Ida in the neck, but considering that his hand immediately went to the side of her neck, she didn't fall. It was a gaze. The woman stepped back. Ghost lowered his gun, letting out another frustrated scream. Fuck! He kicked one of the researchers' bodies, running his hand through his hair. Hunk, do you copy? He asked over the communicator, and shook his head in annoyance at not receiving an answer for some time. Is anyone listening? He tried out again. Ghost, everything is alright out there? I hope so, because we've got a giant problem here. He heard Parker's voice, looking once again through the vent, and through which Ida had fled, and he turned to headed for the double doors ahead. No, it's not okay, but we'll talk later. I'm coming, he said, glancing at his mask burning in the corner of the room.